Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulihi Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen wa alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'du, faqad qala Allahu tabaraka wa ta'ala fil Qur'anil Majid ba'da a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ala inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun الذين آمنوا وكانوا يتقون لهم البشرى في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة لا تبديل لكلمات الله ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. وقال فيه إنه لتذكرة للمتقين. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الله المستعان. يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك نستغيث. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. ربي زدني علما وارزقني فهما. إن علينا جمعه وقرآنا فإذا قرأناه فاتبع قرآنا ثم إن علينا بيانا. ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم الخير. اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد من معدن الجود والكرم منبع الحلم والحكم وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. الحمدللlah व शुक्र लिल्लाह. अल्लाह ताला की दी हुई तौफीक से हमने तज़किरा गौस पाक रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु व रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह का आगाज़ किया है अल्लाह ताला के करम से और तौफीक से, और हुज़ूर अलैहिस्सलाम की फ़यूज़ व बरक़ात और फ़ज़ल से, और हुज़ूर गौसुल आज़म रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु की तवज्जुहात और करम से। ये किताब के मुसन्निफ़, द ऑथर ऑफ दिस बुक इज़ हज़रत अल्लामा सैयद शाह लियाक़त हुसैन क़ादरी चिश्ती रहमतुल्लाहि ताला अलैह, who had written this book in 1945 or written before 1945 but had it published in 1945, and this was his PhD thesis, and it consists of the historical biography of Pirane Pir Radullah Ta'ala Anhu according to the Muhaddithin Kiram. So it is of the most authentic of the records, and it stands out amongst all the other biographies of Hudur Ghawthul Azam Radullah Ta'ala Anhu. And I will read the Urdu and then we will have the translation, and before that we will have a small background of the book, and then a background of Pirane Pir Radullah Ta'ala Anhu, and then we'll start the book. The background of the book is that the author belongs to the family of Hudur Ghawthul Azam Radullah Ta'ala Anhu, and being a descendant, and the main silsila of his is the Qadiriya silsila. And towards the end he has written a thank you note. We'll read that and we'll talk about, first we'll introduce the Ghawthul Azam Shaykh Abdul Qadir GILANI radiyallahu ta'ala anhu in a brief couple of statements, that Huzur Ghawthul Azam is a Hassani and Hussaini Sayyid. Hassani from his father's side, going back to Imam Hassan alayhi salam, his lineage, and then the mother side goes back to Sayyidina Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So he is Najib al-Tarafain, Hassani, Hussaini, Sadaat, and the Muhaddithin have written scores and scores of books related to his nasab, and there are about 300 dalail, 300 references to the authenticity of the nasab of Huzur Ghawthul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And I think that he is the only saint, the only waliullah in which so many muhaddithin and so many historians have written about the authenticity of the lineage of Huzur Ghawthul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And among the greatest things of Huzur Ghawthul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, his achievements, is that his silsila is considered to be the most top of the salasil of the awliyaullah, and it is the most widespread around the whole world. And this can be assessed by the silsila, the murideen of his silsila, numbering and outnumbering all the other salasil, number one. And number two, all of his khulafa have mainly been among his descendants. this is a uniqueness of the silsila of Ghaus al-Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, because all the other salasil, you can see that their salasil goes from the Shaykh to the Murid to the Khalifa to the Khalifa to the Khalifa. It's rarely seen that the descendants of that Waliullah had continued that silsila. This is one of the uniqueness of the Qadira silsila, which is very much ignored or not looked upon by the historians, is because they put a criticism of Ghaus al-Azam saying that the Qadiriya silsila lacks many khulafa in historical terms. And this is absolutely incomplete research, because there are the khulafa of Pirana Pir radiyallahu ta'ala anhu are first of all his descendants, and then the shuyukh in the other salasil, meaning that his khulafa that spread the silsila worldwide are very much known, very well known, and we will see that when we go and examine the shajarat that we have, that especially of the silsila that Hazrat the author Liyaqat Hussain Qadri rahmatullahi ta'ala has gathered. And in our records we have 8 turuq going back to Pirana Pir from Hazrat Safeerullah Aarifbillah Shaykh Liyaqat Hussain Qadri rahmatullahi ta'ala. So he has 8 authorizations going back to Huzur Ghaus al-Azam. The first one is from his family, from his Dadiyal side, and then he has other salasil. So we will examine that later on. So this is the first point. Number 2 is that if you look at the historical history of tasawwuf, tasawwuf is the 3rd branch of Islamic studies. First one is the aqaid of Islam, which has 2 schools, the Ashari and the Maturidi school in the Ahlul Sunnat al Jamaat. And then you have the fiqh department, which is the jurisprudence, the amal of the Quran and the Sunnah. So that is according to the 4 schools of fiqh schools: the school of Imam Azam Abu Hanifa rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, the school of Imam Malik rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, the school of Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, and the school of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. These are the 4 branches of the Sunni schools of fiqh. And Huzur Ghaus al-Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu used to give fatwas in the Hanbali school and in the Shafi'i school. And he used to follow Ghaliban Imam Shafi'i school. And then Huzur alayhi salatu wasalam came in his dream and he told him to switch over to the silsila, the school of thought of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. So that's why he is a Hanbali jurist. And he used to be a mujtahid at the level of the mujtahid, and he was also a muhaddis, when we will see his credentials in the biography. So in the history, and then after the fiqh schools is the school of tasawwuf, the school of ihsan, the school of purification, which is called tasawwuf. And tasawwuf, its many meanings are there in the book of Al-Basair of the author. Without going into detail, there are 4 well-known schools of self-purification, the schools of tasawwuf. There are the number 1 is the Qadiriya, then the Chishtiya, the Suhrawardiya, and then the Naqshbandiya. Now, before these schools became affiliated to each of the founders of these salasil, the Qadiriya with Hazrat Shaykh Abdul Qadir Gilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and the Chishtiya with Hazrat Hazrat Khaja Moinuddin Chishti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, and the Suhrawardiya with Hazrat Shaykh Shahabuddin Suhrawardi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, and the Naqshbandiya with Hazrat Khaja Bahadi Naqshbandi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh. Before these shuyukh were born, these salasil were known by different names. Because if you go back to the mother of all the salasil, they go back to 4 Khanwade and 14 salasil. So they all go back to 4 main silsilas. And all those silsilas used to be all private silsilas. Okay, when we study the shajarat, we will come back to those 4 Khanwada. The 4 Khanwadas, they all were private silsilas, meaning their affiliation being murid at that time was not made for public. It was kept secret, it was kept private, and it was only for super serious adepts or students of those Sufiya Ikram who were intensely strict and intensely zuhad, abstinent in their approach. And all of those go back to every single silsila. Its chain goes back to Hazrat Maula Ali Sher Khuda, Hazrat Sina Ali bin Abi Talib radhiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. And even the Naqshbandiya silsila, I have said this in many of the lectures, going into detail of the Naqshbandiya silsila, that there are 4 turuqs of the Naqshbandiya silsila, and publicly it is known that the Naqshbandiya silsila is the only exceptional silsila that goes to ultimately to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and they try to stand out amongst all the salasil. Now this is partly true and partly not true. Partly true because there are 4 turuqs that the Naqshbandi salasil have, and out of those, one of the silsilas goes to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. But this silsila is admitted by the Naqshbandiya salasil shuyukh, especially Hazrat Abdullah Shah Sahib rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, who was the Muhaddis Dakkan of Hyderabad, and his Khalifa, the youngest Khalifa, was Maulana Abdul Sattar Khan Sahib rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, who was my teacher. And his book, Hazrat Abdullah Shah Sahib's book, Bustanul Arifin, I believe, in it he has explained that the silsila of the Naqshbandiya silsila, the tariqa that goes to Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, is an Owaisi silsila, meaning that just like Hazrat Owais Qarni radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu did not meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam but had spiritually connected with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam spirit, so that is a connection that is not with the teacher and the student physically meeting, but spiritually affiliating and associating. So this silsila has in 4 places, the chain that goes to Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu has in 4 places missing the chain of meeting from Shaykh to student to student to student in 4 places. And in those 4 places, they say that the spirits of these shuyukh used to connect. Okay, the first one is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. His Khalifa is known as Hazrat Salman Farsi radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now after him is Hazrat Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abu Bakr. Now if you look at their histories, there is a gap. They did not meet because the year that Hazrat Salman Farsi radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu passed away, the next year Hazrat Qasim bin Muhammad was born. So their meeting never took place. Now some people add his father, Hazrat Qasim bin Muhammad, Hazrat Muhammad bin Abu Bakr radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. They add Muhammad bin Abu Bakr radhiyallahu anhu. So that makes it complete. Okay, but that's a flaw also, because going back from Hazrat Qasim bin Muhammad, it goes to his maternal grandson, Hazrat Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. Now Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam is a Hussaini Syed from the lineage of Imam Hussain, and that is where Maraj al-Bahrain, the Faizan of the Qadiriya, Chishtiya, Naqshbandiya and other Salasil, and the Naqshbandiya Silsila, they all meet up at Hazrat Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. Now him and his next Shaykh in the tariqat is Hazrat Bayezid Bustami rahmatullahi ta'ala. Hazrat Bayezid Bustami rahmatullahi alayhi, historically they had a gap of life between 65 years to 125 years. So Hazrat, after Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam was passed away, Hazrat Bayezid Bustami rahmatullahi alayhi was born, I think 65 years after. Okay, and then his student Hazrat Abul Hasan Kharqani rahmatullahi alayhi was born 125 to 145 years later. So these are 4 different gaps, so that this makes this silsila that goes, the chain that goes to Hazrat Abu Bakr radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, to be a Owaisi silsila. Now coming back to the other 3 salasil of the Naqshbandiya silsila, they all go back from Hazrat Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam to his paternal side, Hazrat Maula Ali Sher Khuda alayhi salam. So this makes the Naqshbandiya silsila, the shuyukh say that, the Naqshbandi shuyukh say that the faizan in the Naqshbandiya silsila, 3/4 is the Alawi faizan and 1/4 is the faizan of Siddiq Akbar, which is Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhuma. So in conclusion, all of the salasil meet up in the faizan of Huzur Mawla Ali Sharif alayhi salam, and that is supported by mutawatir hadith, man kuntu mawla fahada aliyun mawla. So whosoever's mawla, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said, whosoever's master I am, Ali is also his master. And the persons who gave him the Mubarakbat right at the outset is, first ones were the Shaykhain, Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu and Hazrat Umar Farooq radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. So all the salasil, including the Naqshbandiya silsila, they all culminate at the heart of Hazrat Mawla Ali Sharif alayhi salam, and his source of faiz is from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam ultimately. Okay? So coming back to the salasil after the Char Khanwade, which we will cover later on, when these were private, and then when the time of Hazrat Huzur Ghausul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu came, now his style of disseminating and spreading the faizan was a public one. Now one of the shuyukh of the Shaziliya silsila, Hazrat Abul Hasan Shazili rahmatullah alayhi's teacher going back up is Hazrat Muhammad Hazrat Abu Madian Ghaus al-Maghribi. Hazrat Abu Madian Ghaus is the Ghaus of the west of Africa and Spain. He is known as the Ghaus, and his name is Abu Madian. So he is the Shaykh of the Shaziliya silsila. Now he is one of the Khalifas of Hazrat Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi. So he met Huzur Ghausul Azam during Hajj, and he was given Khilafat by Ghausul Azam, and he says, and it has been quoted by the Shaykh in his silsila, the Khalifa of Hazrat Abul Hasan Hazrat Abul Abbas Mursi rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, who was the Khalifa of Hazrat Abul Hasan Shazili rahmatullahi alayhi. Now his Khalifa, Hazrat Abul Abbas Mursi rahmatullah's Khalifa is Hazrat Shaykh Ahmad ibn Ata'Allah al-Iskandari rahmatullahi alayhi, who was a Shaykh from Jami al-Azhar, and he was one of the top scholars of the silsila of Shaziliya silsila. Now he says that before Ghausul Azam, all the salasil were very private, and it was closed to the public. They did not allow regular people to become murid, because this was very, very strict. The program that they had for self-purification was private, and we'll see a history why this became private, because the Prophet ﷺ, the Khulafa Rashidin, when they were there, especially Mawla Ali Sharif alayhi salam, the faizan was public. Why did it become private? We have to go into history for that. But then when Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu came, he made it public again. Because Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu is the one who established the tariqas, the salasil as we see it in the whole world, this is to the credit of Ghausul Azam, because he is the one who made the Bayt system become public. And then he gave Bayt or took Bayt from everyone, from the rich, the poor, the good, the bad, and everyone. So he made it open. Okay, and this was done at the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and at the command of Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam and Mawla Ali Sharif alayhi salam. We'll see that when we get to that period of time. So the conclusion is that Huzur Ghausul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu is known as the Sultan of Awliya Allah. He is the king of all the Awliya Allah. And we will also examine how he has become that Sultan, and then also that not just his silsila is not independent of other salasil. And I can say from experience and from research and from all of my life's research, I can say and dispel this misconception that each silsila is independent of each other. No, there is not a single silsila in all of the salasil that is independently separate from other shuyukh. Meaning that all the silsilas are what? Are chains of narration, chain of from student to teacher, student teacher, student teacher, going all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. And these chains are unbroken. Okay? And if it's a broken one, then it will be an oasis silsila, the spiritual silsila, not a physical silsila. Okay? So when these silsilas are connected, they are also each of the shuyukh, that chain of transmission, also each of the shuyukh used to go and had studied with other shuyukh from other salasil. Meaning if there are 50 silsilas, all of those silsilas, all of those teachers, one at a time in their lifetime, they studied from different shuyukh. And that's how they became connected with one and each other. That's why it's very hard to pinpoint one silsila together, but they are all connected. So this is a misconception that each of our silsila are different. If we have the Qadirah silsila, we wear green, that means we are different, we only wear green. And the Chishti, I think that we only wear yellow, and the other salasil wear different color. It's not about wearing colors. It's not about differentiating yourself. It's about taking away all of your distinctions and all of your identities away. That's what tasawwuf is. We will get to that. So the salasil are all interconnected. Okay, and what happens is that these are the schools of self-purification, the schools going back to the Prophet ﷺ. So that means that each of the silsila is like a school, like you have a grade school, you have a high school, you have a college, you have a university, and each of the school claims to the general public saying that our school is the best school. We have the top most graduates, and they are this much qualified, they make this much money, they've invented so many things, and all of these things. So each of the silsilas, that the shuyukh al-tariqat, they also boast about their own silsilas. Now this is fine up to a point. Like each one has to have their spirit, like a school spirit you have. So each one has to have a spirit that thinks that his school is the best, so you can do your best, put your best effort, and you become one of the best examples and product of that school. Okay, this is allowed and is a must for each silsila. But at the same time, it becomes haram to do things that negate other silsilas, that ridicule other silsilas, or put others down. Because you cannot do that, because all the silsilas are themselves interconnected. And if you put one silsila down, you're automatically putting your own silsila down, because none of the silsilas are independent of each other. People should understand this. And this is because each of the silsilas are like the branches of the Prophet ﷺ's students, or the Prophet ﷺ's army of knowledge. So if each branch, like the right wing, left wing, front wing, and the back wing, and then you have the center, each of these silsilas, or each of these quarters, if they're in the army and they start saying we are the best, and they start fighting amongst each other, that is total chaos. The army is not supposed to have a civil war. They're supposed to fight the enemy, and the enemy is shaitan and its troops. So each of the branches of the silsilas, they specialize in a special type of self-purification. That's why they are a different school. So if they have a specialization in a different type of self-purification, you can boast on that up to a certain limit, but you're not supposed to put others down. Okay? Then that is just being worldly. It's not the etiquette and adab and tariqa of the true Sufiya Ikram. Okay? Without going to examples. So Huzur Ghausul Azam radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when we say that his silsila is the most highest, or he's the most widespread, we're not negating anyone else. We're saying that because of his efforts and the faizan that he spread, that his silsila has grown that much. Okay? And he has disseminated or distributed the faizan, the prophetic faizan, to all the other salasil, and the other salasil have taken faizan from him as well. And Huzur Ghawsul Azam himself has taken faizan from other shuyukh as well. We will see that he had 4 recorded shuyukh tariqat, apart from the teachers of his other subjects. But in tasawwuf he had 4 shuyukh tariqat. Okay. So in a nutshell, that the silsila of Huzur Ghawsul Azam radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu wa rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh is one of the most distinguished, one of the most oldest, and the first one to make it into a public association. Before that, every silsila used to be private, and when Ghawsul Azam opened it, all the other salasil also started to make it open. Okay, that's why you have, if you go into history, there's lots and lots of historical events that happened, and one of the this is enough of an introduction for the silsila and for Ghawsul Azam. So now we will read the shukriya, the thank you note on page 71 before we start this. And the book is written in was written in 1945, and the first is so what I want to read here is Izhar-e Masarrat. Now, back in 2003, my father had asked my teacher, Hazrat the Professor Dr. Abul Khairat Maulana Muhammad Abdul Sattar Khan Sahab, Naqshbandi Qadri. He was also Naqshbandi and Qadri at the same time, and other Salasil also. So he wrote because he was a colleague of our grandfather, the author of this book, he wrote a letter of appreciation and also of happiness. And we had not published this letter until this new book. So this is the printing of this is the 4th or the 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the 4th printing of this book. First one is in 1945, second one in 1983, third one in 2018, and the 4th one is the 2021, which we have this book. And next, not this coming Saturday, but the next Saturday, November 19, we will be having the Giyarween Shareef and the Badi Giyarween Shareef. Today is the day of the main Giyarween Shareef, and then the Badi Giyarween Shareef, we will have the book distribution of this, inshallah ta'ala. Which is free, fi sabilillah, it's for free, for anyone who can read the Urdu. So first we will start the Izhar-e Masarrat. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulihil Amin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. The letter is from Professor Maulana Abdul Sattar Khan Sahab rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, who was a junior professor of our grandfather, and he was under our grandfather when he was the head of the Arabic department. And after he retired, another person took over, and then after that, Maulana Sattar Khan Sahab took over. So he says, एक इशारा गैबी से ये आजिज़ मौलाना से शाह लियाकत हुसैन क़ादरी साबिक़ सदर शोबे अरबी जामे उस्मानिया अलैहिर्रहमा की तसनीफ़ मुनीफ़ तज़किराह गौस पाक क़ुद्दिस सिर्रहू और किताब मुसम्मा बसाइर जुज़ राबे यानी वॉल्यूम 4 का मसवदा बराए इशाअत अव्वल के मुताले से बहरावर हुआ। मौलाना अलैहिर्रहमा यानी मौलाना लियाकत हुसैन क़ादरी अलैहिर्रहमा अलैहिर्रहमत व रिदवान आलिम बाअमल और मुक़्तज़ाए रोज़गार थे। Meaning that he is talking about the author of the book, and the author has written these 2 books, and the Basair, which was during his lifetime only published with the first 3 volumes. Alhamdulillah, we have had the honor of printing all 4 volumes into one, and that was done in 2015. And the book has been out of publication, or it's out of stock. Inshallah, we will print it again in the future. And he wrote a letter for these 2 books, for the publication of these books. And he said, he says that the author Maulana Liyaqat Qadri alayhi rahmah was an alim, a scholar who was practicing what he preached, and he was a muqtadai rozgar, and he was the leading person of in his field. इल्म और अमल में काबिल तक़लीद किरदार के हामिल थे. In his knowledge and his practice, he was a very great example to be followed during his lifetime. अल्लामा इक़बाल अलैहि रहमा के कौल के मुताबिक गुफ्तार में, किरदार में उनकी बुरहान थे, उसकी बुरहान थे. So according to Allama Iqbal, he said that guftar in talking and in kirdar in actions, यानी कुरान और सुन्नत की बुरहान थे. He was a torch of light that was guiding people according to the Quran and Sunnah, not just in his talk but also in his actions. अपने साहिबजादों को दीन पर इस्तिकामत और इशाअत हक़ का बाबुल इल्म के उन्वान से एक प्रोग्राम दिया. So for his kids and his silsila, he had made an institute to practice and to propagate the deen, the literature of the deen, and also to teach and to practice and to train people in the Quranic silsila. He made an idara, a center called Babul Ilm. Babul Ilm comes from Bab means gate and Ilm means knowledge. Babul Ilm, this is one of the titles of Hazrat Maula Ali Shareef al-Islam, in which in Tirmidhi Shareef, Prophet ﷺ has said, Ana Madinatul Ilmi wa Aliyun Babuha, that I am the city of knowledge and Ali is the gate of that knowledge. So Dada Hazrat has made this group, and alhamdulillah through this group we have published all these books, and we have a family program also that was established, and this was done in 1974. के उन्वान से एक प्रोग्राम दिया जिस पर ये नई दुनिया में अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह पाबंद हैं. And even in this world, the new world, which is the Americas in Chicago, his descendants, his family is practicing and also promoting this idara, the center of Babul Academy, Babul Foundation. Allah Ta'ala इस सिलसिले को नस्लन बाद नस्लिन बाकी और जारी रखे, आमीन, बिहुरमति सैयदुल मुरसलीन सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम. And he read a dua that Allah make this silsila from generation to generation be active till the day of judgment, in the honor of the Prophet ﷺ, who is the chief of all the mursaleen. तज़किरह गौस पाक और बसायर मुकम्मल जुज़ 1-4 की इशाअत पर ये आजिज़, यानी हज़रत मौलाना के साहिबजादों, यानी कि ये आजिज़ यानी मौलाना सदात खान साहब is saying that his Maulana Liyaqat Qadri's kids, he's telling them, he's congratulating them. He's saying that कि साहिबजादों को मुबारकबाद पेश करता हूँ कि इस बेदीनी माहौल में क़ारीन किराम को, यानी कि in this world where there's बेदीनी, उसको दीन बादीन बनाने का जो कोशिश है उसके अंदर, और जो लोग ये किताब पढ़ेंगे उनके लिए इकराम को हकीकी दीनी मालूमात मिलेंगे. And in these books he is saying that not just Islamic knowledge but the reality of all the Islamic knowledge you gain through the literature of Maulana Liyaqat Qadri alayhi rahmah. और इनके हक़ में ये सदक़ा जारिया होगा, and this will be a sadaqat jariya for Maulana Liyaqat Hussain alayhi rahma. Amin thumma Amin. Khak Paye Awliya. And this was written in 17th February 2003 in Chicago. And the page number 4 is Hadiya. It's the dedication of this book. Ba'aunahu wa karamahu. Is Mukhtasar, so Maulana Liyaqat Hussain Qadri alayhi rahma in 1945 has written, Is Mukhtasar Mubarak Tazkire ko मैं अपने वालिद माजिद पीरो मुर्शिद मुस्तखलफ़ तरीक़त, यानी जिससे मौलाना को खिलाफत मिली, यानी हमारे मौलाना लियाक़त हुसैन क़ादरी रहमतुल्लाह के वालिद, यानी हमारे परदादा हज़रत सैयद शाह हुसैन क़ादरी सानी रहमतुल्लाह ताला अलैह, जो थे सज्जादा नशीन उनके ददियाली साइड पर, हज़रत बाईस ख्वाजा रहमतुल्लाह अलैह जो हैं गुदड़ी वाले शाह साहब, हज़रत जो उनका टाइटल था, हज़रत सैयद शाह हुसैन क़ादरी शेर सवार मुर्शिद, who was the murshid of Amir Kabir Nawab Khurshid Bahadur. Khurshid Bahadur was one of the government officials, the second in command to the 5th and 6th Nizam. And he was also the Amir Kabir. He was the Amir of all the Umara of the time, about 100 years ago. And then our Pardada was also the Sajada machine of his father-in-law, Hazrat Sayyid Sahab Qibla Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh. Nasir Wali, Hazrat Sayyid Shah Nasiruddin Ali Qadiri, who was Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayh, who was Murshid Sultan Dakkan Nizamul Mulk Nawab Mir Mahbub Ali Khan Bahadur. The 6th Nizam, Hazrat Nasir Wali Rahmatullahi alayh, Sayyid Sahab Qibla Rahmatullahi alayh was the pure Murshid of the 6th Nizam. तो इन तीन बुजुर्गों की यादगार में आपने लिखा, आप फरमाते हैं कि इनकी यादगार बतौर हदिया अहले सुलूक करता हूँ। तो अहले सुलूक के लिए ये गिफ्ट है सबके लिए, जिनकी और हिज फादर जिनकी मुखलिसाना तालीम तरबियत व मुशफ़िक़ाना सोहबत की याद बफ़ज़्ल ही ताला शानहू ज़ौक़ इल्मी व इरफ़ानी व शौक़ दीनी व रूहानी कशाइश में मीनार हिदायत बनी रही. So he's saying that all of the shauq and the zawq and the efforts that he's putting in the deen, in the deeni works, he has gotten all of these from his Pir Murshid, his father, and it is through he has gotten the hidayat through his father from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khadim Halqa Sadaat, the servant of the Sadaat, Faqeer Sayyid Shah Liyaqat Hussain Qadri, Afiyallah anhu. And this was written in 3rd June 1945. And then he wrote a Ittila General. When he published in 1983, he added a letter of the weekly and monthly activities that he used to do at the masjid and at his house, which is written in one of his grandson's name, Sayyid Shah Kaleemuddin Hussain Qadri Mahmud Pir, who was at this time 3 or 4 years old in 1983, or 5 years old, 4 years old. So this Maulana Liyaqat Hussain Qadri Rahmatullah alayhi wrote it himself, because a 4 or 5 year old cannot write this. So this was a way in which our grandfather used to encourage his youngsters and promote their good and deeni works. Now he wrote the introduction, and just before the introduction was also written by Maulana Liyaqat Hussain Qadri Rahmatullah alayhi, but he wrote it in the name of one of his second last son, Maulana Sayyid Shah Nematullah Hussaini Qadri, yani GHAUS Pir. So before we read that, we will read the Shukriya at the end, and then we will start the book. And they're saying that whatever we are doing it at our house, our grandfather used to do that in the masjid of Sayyid Sahib Qibla Rahmatullahi Ta'ala alayhi, and also at his own house in the monthly and weekly activities. So इजहार तशक्कुर, अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह रब्बिल आलमीन अरबी एक शेर है, उसका तर्जुमा। तारीफ़ है उसकी जिसने ये हसीन और जमील किताबचे की सूरत अता की, और शुक्रिया है उसका जो साइल को अच्छे अल्फाज से नवाजा, यानी अल्लाह ताला का शुक्र अदा फरमाए। अल्लाह, और इसका तर्जुमा जो है पहले न था, इसको इदारा जो बाबुल इल्म है उसके तहत इसमें जितने भी अरबी और फ़ारसी जितने भी अशार थे सबको उर्दू तर्जुमा किए, और इस इदारे के अंदर 2-3 लोग शामिल है। एक फ़कीर मुज़म्मिल है, दूसरे जो है मौलाना मुफ्ती मोहम्मद ख़ान क़ादरी साहब, और हमारे वालिद माजिद मौलाना सैयद ग़ियासुद्दीन हुसैन क़ादरी साहब पीर, और वालदा मोहतरमा आयशा क़ादरी, ग़ियास क़ादरी। ये 4-5 हज़रात हैं। और तो आप फरमाते हैं अल्लाह तबारक व तआला का शुक्र है कि ये सआदत हासिल हुई। मैं अपने बरादरान ज़ी एहतराम हज़रत सैयद शाह अली मूसा रज़ा क़ादरी यानी मुर्शिद पीरा व मौलाना सैयद मुर्तज़ा बादशाह क़ादरी ज़रीन कुला मद्दज़ल्लहु कला ज़रीन पोश व मौलाना सैयद शाह क़ादिर हुसैन क़ादरी, मौलाना दादा हज़रत के दादा बा के दूसरे भाई, पहले छोटे भाई सैयद शाह क़ादिर हुसैन क़ादरी, व मौलाना सैयद शाह नासिरुद्दीन अली क़ादरी, दादा के सबसे छोटे भाई। दादा के 4 भाई थे, बड़े भाई आप मंझले थे, तीसरे और चौथे, तो आपके तीनों भाई और ये बहन वही। ये जो मौलाना मुर्तज़ा पाशा क़ादरी है, ये वालिद साहब होते हैदराबाद में जो अब मशाइखीन में से है, हज़रत क़बूल पाशा क़ादरी, महमूद पाशा क़ादरी और अहमद पाशा क़ादरी, इनके वालिद माजिद है। तो इनकी जो पहली वालिदा थे उनका जो है ज़चगी में इंतकाल हो गया था, वो मौलाना लियाक़त क़ादरी रहमतुल्लाह अलैह की सगी बहन थे। फिर उनका इंतकाल हुआ बाद जो दूसरी उनकी शादी हुई थी, तो उनसे ये तीनों साहबजादेगान पैदा हुए, और वो लोग आज भी जो है दादा हज़रत को यानी दादा अब्बा को मामू जान बोल कर पुकारते हैं। उनकी बड़ी तारीख़ी वाक़यात है उनके। तो आप फरमाते हैं बसवी में क़ल्ब यानी कि दिल की गहराइयों से शुक्रिया अदा करता हूँ कि इन हज़रात की पैहम हिदायत व फ़यूज़ सोहबत ने मुझे इस काबिल बनाया कि तज़किरे नवेसी की सआदत हासिल करूँ, व नेज़ हल्क़े के मुतक़िदीन व का ममनून हो कि उनके मुतालबे ने मुझे इस दफ़ा कार खैर की अंजामदेही के लिए आमदगी ही कर दिया, और मुखलिसीन फ़र्जंदान का मशकूर हों कि उनकी इआनत से ये सआदत हासिल हुई। और अपने तो so he's I think that was self-explanatory. It's not too difficult to understand that. और अपने असातिज़ा मोहतरम मौलाना सैयद शाह सिबगतुल्लाह साहब क़ादरी चिश्ती मद्दज़ल्लहु व मुअज़्ज़ज़ दोस्त मौलाना इब्न अबुल खैर मौलाना इब्नुल खैर अबुल फ़ता मोहम्मद नसरुल्लाह साहब सनूसी क़ादरी का शुक्रगुज़ार हूँ कि इन हज़रात के मज़हबी वसी कुतुब खानों की हर मुफीद किताब उनके हुस्न अखलाक से मुझ जैसे तशनाए इल्म के लिए हर वक्त फ़राहम होती रही, और मेरे मुआविनीन मुखलिसीन का शुक्रगुज़ार हूँ। अगर सब की नेकी व इआनत शरीक हाल ना होती तो शायद इस किताबचे को भी इस इस्तेनाद व इज्तिहाद व सही मसनाए शहूद पर लाने से कासिर रहता। यानी कि इसकी इशाअत और इसकी लिखने की जो इसका तर्जुमा नीचे है मुश्किल अल्फाज का, तो वो देख ले सकते हैं आप। यानी कि ये मुस्तनद तौर पर ये किताब नहीं होती थी। अगर ये शयूख के जो टेक्स्ट बुक्स थे, जो ओरिजिनल सोर्स बुक्स है, उस तक अगर मैं नहीं होता तो ये बहुत ही हाई कैलिबर की किताब नहीं लिख सकता था। उम्मीद है कि अगर खुदा ने चाहा आइंदा भी इन हज़रात किराम के मुआवनत से अहले तरीक़त की बहुत कुछ खिदमत हो सकती है। खुदा इन सब को मेरे दीगर मोहसिनीन को सवाब अजीम और अजर जजील अता फ़रमाए, हल्का क़ादिरिया को कायम व दायम रखे, आमीन। यह हज़रत मौलाना का शेर है, मौलाना लियाक़त हुसैन क़ादरी हुसैनी पीरा रहमतुल्लाह अलैह का। तेरे हाथों के सदक़े और दे फिर भर के पैमाना, तेरे हाथों के सदक़े और दे फिर भर के पैमाना, रहे लाखों बरस साक़ी तेरा आबाद मैखाना, रहे लाखों बरस साक़ी तेरा आबाद मैखाना। तेरे हाथों के सदक़े और दे फिर भर के पैमाना, रहे लाखों बरस साक़ी तेरा आबाद मैखाना। दाइम इन्हीं हाथों से पीते रहे मैखारा, दाइम इन्हीं हाथों से पीते रहे मैखारा, या रब यही साक़ी हो, या रब यही पैमाना। दाइम इन्हीं हाथों से पीते रहे मैखारा, या रब यही साक़ी हो, या रब यही पैमाना। इसके बाद हम इंट्रोडक्शन स्टार्ट करेंगे। और ये इंट्रोडक्शन 1983 में ऐड किया गया था। एक ही पेज का मुख्तसर है लेकिन बहुत मुफीद और मुदल्लल है। पेज नंबर 7, हज़रत मुहिउद्दीन मुजद्दिद आज़म, हज़रत गौसुल आज़म as being the mujaddid, one of the greatest mujaddids of the Islamic history, and he is one of the greatest of the mujaddideen, and he is the mujaddid considered the mujaddid of the 5th century. हज़रत रसूल मकबूल सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने इरशाद फरमाया कि इहया सुन्नत व शरीयत के लिए हर सदी में एक मुजद्दिद होगा। ये हदीस शरीफ का हवाला है इदारे की तरफ से, इदारा बाबुल सुनन अबू दाऊद, हदीस सही नंबर 4291। यानी कि हुज़ूर अलैहिस्सलाम has said that for the revival of the sunnat and the shariat, for the Islamic law, in every 100 years Allah Ta'ala will place a reviver, a mujaddid, who will revive the deen. Marure zamana, यानी with the passing of the time, मरूर ज़माना से मज़हब की तामील की मरूर ज़माना से मज़हब की तामील में कमज़ोरी पैदा हो तो शरीयत व सुन्नत की हिफाजत और उसूल इस्लाम की सही तालीम व तबलीग के लिए कुदरत इलाही से कोई आलिम मुतबहर पैदा होगा जो कार जदीद अंजाम देगा और अहकाम इलाही व सुन्नत मुस्तफ़ाई सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की तामील में इस्लाह करेगा। Now the Urdu style of Dada Hazrat was very high and very sophisticated, and it was as some of the ulama described that it was at the level of Imam Hazrat Allama Iqbal rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh, because his teachers were 100 years ago they used to live, and he was taught by those types of teachers, those people who were alive at the time of Allama Iqbal. So now what he's saying is that because of the timing, when the time passes in each of the generations, the amal of the community of the ummah becomes, as it goes away from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it becomes weakened. Because if you see that your generation and your parents' generation and your grandparents' generation, you see that there's a decline in the implementation of the Sharia in the following. So you kids who are watching, you can see that whatever Sunnat and Islamic culture that you are seeing is only a fraction of what your parents saw, and what they saw is only a fraction of their grandparents saw. And if their parents and grandparents, going back to the Prophet ﷺ, where the Islamic culture and Islamic law and was followed by everyone in the most accomplished way. So with this decline of the amal and kamzori of the Shariat, and to protect it, Allah Ta'ala has placed the revival of the correct ta'limat. Allah Ta'ala will choose one of the great ulama of each of the time to revive the deen. And there can be not just only one mujaddid, there can be different types of people who become the revivers, the mujaddideen of Islam, meaning that they can be in different parts of the world, they can be in different times. Okay, and one of them, their tasks is that to preserve the reality of their teachings, not to let it get changed by the circumstances of the time, but to preserve the reality of it, to preserve it in the word form and in the action form, and also to preserve the whole of the Shariat, the teachings of the Quran and the amal of the Prophet ﷺ, and to also propagate it and also to correct it within themselves and with others. ऐसा ही होता रहा। 5वीं सदी हिजरी के निस्फ दोम में कादिर मुतलक ने हज़रत शेख मुहिद्दीन अब्दुल कादिर जिलानी रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु को सन 470 हिजरी में ज़हूर बख्शा, और आपने सन 561 हिजरी में वफ़ात पाई। So Allah Ta'ala chose the Prophet ﷺ's deen to be revived in the 5th century with the personality of Hazrat Shaykh Muhyiddin Abdul Qadir Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Now I want to clarify one thing, that I keep on saying radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. Many people think that this word, this dua, which is dua khair ki dua hai ke may Allah Ta'ala be pleased with this personality. Some people only limit this to the Sahaba Kiram, which is up to a certain extent is correct, but then Allah Ta'ala in the Quran has said that those people who follow the Sahaba Kiram, manit tabi'ahum bi ihsanin, यानी कि उनको भी जो लोग उनकी इताअत करेंगे, सहाबा की जो इताअत करेंगे, उनके ताबईन होंगे till the day of judgment. मुफस्सिरीन बताते हैं कि the dua ya kalima of radiyallahu anhu can be associated to non-sahaba kiram also. So this is not a contentious issue because Huzur Ghausul Azam has a special rank among the awliya Allah, in which he is known as radiyallahu anhu, and rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi means may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on him. So he was born in the year 470 Hijri and passed away in 561 Hijri, and this corresponds to I believe 1077 he was born, and 1166 he passed away in the Gregorian solar calendar. Zaid az nisf sadi aapne वही इलाही कलाम रब्बानी व हदीस नबवी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की तालीम व तबलीग में नुमाया खिदमात अंजाम दी. So more than 50 years, more than half a century, he served the Quran, the kalam, the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Quran, and the hadith of the Prophet taaleem and tabligh, and its implementation, not just in the scholarly circles but also in the public atmosphere, and also in the non-Muslims as well. और शरीयत इलाही की इल्मी व अमली एतबार से हिफाजत व सियानत की, और बमिस्दाक़ हदीस अल उलमाउ उम्मती का अंबियाई बनी इसराइल एहयाए सुन्नत व शरीयत इस्लामी की खिदमात अंजाम दी. इसलिए उलमा व उरफा ने आपको मुहिउद्दीन यानी दीन को ज़िंदा करने वाला का लक़ब से मुलक़ब किया। Because of the protection of the Shariat and its propagation, the life of Huzur Ghausul Azam Razillahu Anhu can be described by the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, Ulama'u ummati ka anbiya'i bani Israel. उसका तर्जुमा है ना, ये जो ओरिजिनल किताब में नहीं था, इसका भी जो है इदारे की तरफ से डिटेल ये है कि इस रिवायत so the tarjuma is that the ulama of my ummah are like the prophets of Bani Israel. Okay, now there's some kalam on this hadith. We will start it and we will continue next Giyarween Shareef. Is riwayat ki murad. Okay, there's some kalam. Some of the muhaddiseen, they say that this hadith has no roots going back to the Prophet ﷺ. Like Imam Jalaluddin Suyuti rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, I checked, he said that there is no chain of narration for this hadith, so it might be one of the mawzu'at. But because this hadith is widely accepted by ulama ikram, because it legitimizes their position as being the inheritors of the Bani Israel, the Anbiya of the Bani Israel. But here the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said that they are like the prophets of Bani Israel. That's why this hadith becomes contentious for two reasons. One, for the lack of the chain of narration. Number two is that the ulama that of his ummah, now this can also mean the ulama haq and ulama su, and the false or worldly scholars. Now that's why this hadith is taken into special care, saying that this cannot mean those who are corrupt scholars. So they cannot be like the prophets of the previous Anbiya. Now the awliyaullah, they have said that this hadith, if it is the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes what happens is that a saying can be attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, which might be a saying of one of the Sahaba Ikram. And this also can happen. So this might be a saying of the Prophet ﷺ, or it could be sayings of one of the Sahaba Ikram. So the Urafa have said that because the Prophet ﷺ didn't say that they are the inheritors, the ulama of this ummah are the inheritors of the prophets of Bani Israel, he said, my ulama from my ummah are like, he likened them, ka anbiya'i Bani Israel. So he likened them to the prophets of the Bani Israel. So now they expanded this point into an elaborative discussion. Now this discussion is that I will start this off and then we will continue next week inshallah. इस रिवायत की मुराद आम उलमाए इस्लाम नहीं है, बल्कि खवास आइम्माए अहले बैत यानी इसना अशरा 12 खुलफाए बातिन अलैहिमुस्सलाम मुराद हैं. Now who are these? Now so he's saying that the Prophet ﷺ, where he said the ulama of my ummah are like the prophets of Bani Israel, the Urafa have said that these ulama do not refer to the regular ulama, the scholars of the book, but the scholars of the spiritual highest sciences, which are the 4 khulafai batin. Now who are they? It will continue. And they are from the khas of the Ahlul Bayt, and they are the aimma of the Ahlul Bayt. So there are 4 khulafai batin, and khulafa means the deputies of the Prophet ﷺ, and they are spiritual khalifas in spirituality. Okay. For tabarruk, before we finish that, we will read that next week. We'll finish this letter of Hazrat rahmatullah alayh, and then we'll continue with the footnote to understand who are the Anbiya Bani Israel. अहकाम इस्लाम दो किस्म पर हैं, एक अकायद, दूसरे आमाल। बहैसियत सूफ़ी आप यानी हुज़ूर गौसुल आज़म रज़ियल्लाहु अन्हु ने अकायद की इस्लाह की और बहैसियत मुज्तहिद इस्लाह आमाल की। यानी कि the commands of the Quran are two types. One is aqaid, the beliefs, and the other is a'mal. So the aqaid, so as a Sufi, he corrected the aqaid of the people, and as a mujtahid, a person who is at the level of the four imams of fiqh, he corrected people's behavior, their beliefs, aqaid, and also their behaviors. और ihya सुन्नत व तामीम व तरवीज शरीयत इस्लामी की ज़बरदस्त खिदमत अंजाम दी. And the revival of the sunnat and the ta'meem wa tarweej, the promotion and the implementation of the Shariat Islami, he did an outstanding and a superb ज़बरदस्त खिदमत अंजाम दी. मुजद्दिद व मुहियुद्दीन की हैसियत से आपकी मिल्ली खिदमात सारे आलम इस्लाम पर छा गईं. And his efforts of being a reviver of the deen as a mujaddid and the reviver of the deen, the muhiuddin, as the position, and his khidmat, his efforts made the whole of Islamic world revive again. And the best example in a nutshell is that every silsila after him followed and made their silsila come into the public sphere. And also that in the political and the geopolitical and also the historical records, one of the biggest personalities of Islam is Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi rahmatullah alayh. His army was all collectively made of either the murideen of Huzur Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu anhu or the sons of Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu anhu, and he himself, Salahuddin Ayyubi rahmatullah alayh, was a murid of the smallest and youngest son of Huzur Ghausul Azam, Hazrat Shaykh Abdul Aziz rahmatullah alayh. So the soldiers of Hazrat Sultan Sayyid Salahuddin Ayyubi and the top generals of his were the students of Imam Ghazali, and his whole army was mainly from the crop of the Qadiriya silsila. And Hazrat Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi rahmatullah alayhi was also a Qadiri himself. So this, and he is the one who had liberated the Holy Land, the Bayt al-Maqdis, from the Kuffars, from the Salibis' occupation for 90 years. And 100 years ago, it has gone back into their hands again. So we are waiting for another Salahuddin Ayyubi coming from the teachings of Huzur Ghausul Azam. So this is the impact that he had, and not just his own sphere of influence, but throughout the history, he is known as the greatest of the Mujaddideen. So his आपके खिदमात सारे आलम इस्लाम पर छा गई और निज़ाम इस्लामी मजबूत व मुस्तहकम असास पर कायम हुआ. And after Salahuddin Ayyubi, the Osmani Khilafat and the people of other kingdoms who were Sunni, they all used to associate themselves with the Qadiriya Shuyukh and the descendants of Huzur Ghausul Azam radhiyallahu anhu. So this was, and the Ottoman Khilafat, the Sultanate, was so vast that in history it is the most longest lasting empire, and by one single family. And no other empire or family in history has ruled for that long, for almost 600 years. And they were all, majority of them were Qadiri, and especially the last acting Khalifa, Sultan Abdul Hamid. He was a Qadri, practicing murid, and also a Shaykh al-Tariqat in the silsila. So this is the impact that Huzur Ghaus al-Azam used to have and still has. हर दौर के उलमा व उरफा मोतरफ रहे कि आपकी तबलीग बलीग से अहले इस्लाम ताबे शरीयत इलाही होकर पाबंद सुन्नत नबवी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम हुए. And because of this, the Sunni aqaid were kept in place by the Osmani Khilafat, and who the other kingdoms who were smaller in area and number, they also used to follow the Osmanis who were influenced by the Hanafi school and the Qadiriya Silsila and other Salasil. And they were Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, and that had continued up till 100 years ago when the Khilafat was dismantled. Ahle Islam tabe Shariat Ilahi hokar paband Sunnat Nabawi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam hue, and this was implemented in all of the Islamic Ummah. And because of these efforts, now mark this in history, that during these times there were not any big fitnas in either aqaid or in fiqh or in other fields, because all of these fields were established by the hukumat and they were enforced. So the 100 years later, after the Khilafat is dismantled, we see that there are people who don't comply to the aqaid of the schools of Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat. You have people who don't comply and are independent, and they're ghair muqallid of the four schools of fiqh. And then you have some people who are spiritualists that have no chain going back to the Prophet ﷺ. And you have people leaving Islam, and because it is one of the effects of the structure of the Sunni Islam that has been broken down, which was upheld and established and run through the faizan of the Awliya Allah and the Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat, especially of the efforts of Huzur Ghaus al-Azam, the Mujaddid-ud-Din, the Muhyiddin Abdul Qadir Jilani radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. तो उसका इतना बड़ा नुकसान हुआ. और कुरान मजीद और हदीस नबवी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की रोशनी में इस्लामी तर्ज हयात मजबूत और मुस्तहकम हो गई. For after him till 100 years, it remained strong. आपके इल्मी व रूहानी व नूरानी तालीम के असरात सदियों से हनोज कायम है और इंशाअल्लाह ताला बाकी रहेंगे. And not just for 100 years, it has slowed down and has declined, but inshallah ta'ala, through the faizan, this will continue to the day of judgment. यही वजह है कि हनोज ऐसे बुजुर्ग मिल्लत आली कदर वलीउल्लाह की हयात तय्यबा के हालात और उनके नज़रियात आलिया से आज भी मिल्लत इस्लामिया के शायकीन को वाकिफ होने की ख्वाहिश है. And because of this high caliber personality of Huzur Ghaus al-Azam, it demands everyone to learn the actual life of Huzur Ghaus al-Azam from the most authentic and reliable sources, and how all of the nizam of Islam was established and run through the faizan of this great personality. People want to know his life. That is the reason that Maulana Liyaqat Qadri alayhi rahmah has written this book. जैसे जिसके पेश नज़र ये तज़किरा शाये किया जा रहा है. And because of this need that everyone needs to know about the reality and life of Ghaus al-Azam, this book is being written for that purpose. And the dua is Allah Ta'ala qabul farmaye aur ahle shariat wa tariqat ko mustafiz hone ka mauqa ata farmaye. Ameen. And may Allah Ta'ala accept this work and the people of the shariat and tariqat May they receive the fuyuzat, the spiritual emanations, spiritual flow, the enabling graces from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the spirituality of Ghausul Azam, and re-establish the Islamic way of life. Khadime Halqa Qadiriya, Seysha Nematullah Hussaini Qadiri Ghausfir, Ghafirallahu wa liwalidayyahu, BSE, Farzand wa Khalifa Hazrat Musannif alayhi rahmah. And the footnote will start from next week, and we have gone over time, but alhamdulillah, I wanted to finish this, inshallah ta'ala. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.